welcome back to my channel. My name is Angel. It is so very nice to meet you. Thank you for being here today. Good to see you again. So the last video that I posted, the last full-length video, was the one where I went to the latte market, did some shopping, took my cousin with me, got to visit some stores, and in one of those stores I actually got to practice some speaking with some Korean natives, which is really fun and really nice. I cannot wait to go back there and see them again. They also have some skincare that I actually really need to stock up on, but that's besides the point. Point of this video is I got some questions about like, wow, like you were speaking Korean, it's so cool that you got to speak Korean with them. How are you learning Korean? What are your studying like resources and stuff like that? And so I wanted to sit down and make a video just detailing how I'm learning Korean, how I started learning Korean. Your girl is like what, 3, 4, maybe 5 months in, so haven't been doing this for too long, like years and years and years, but I wanted to kind of sit down and go over how I got started learning, what are the resources that I use, some tips that I have for people who are looking to start learning Korean, or maybe you're thinking about it but you don't really know where to start or what to use or where to go, so on and so forth. This is going to be the video for you. Now, before we get started, my #1 tip for people learning Korean, or if you're just starting to learn Korean or you want to start but you don't really know where to go, if you want to learn Korean, listen to me and listen to me good. Google Translate, we don't know her, all right? We no longer use Google Translate. I'm gonna tell you why. It is all about Papago, okay? Google Translate, never heard of her. Papago is the name, Korean translation is the game, baby, okay? We're starting off with some part. Korean translation, Papago. Do not use Google Translate, and I'm gonna tell you why. Google Translate will present to you the dictionary textbook definition of a lot of verbs, and Korean is all about verb endings. Verb endings kind of dictate what the sentence means, what tense the sentence is in sometimes, who's doing what, how they're doing it, when they're doing it, why they're doing it. It is all about the verbs. So if you're using the textbook definition, it's not going to make sense a lot of the times. Papago is very different in that it is built to translate Korean. It even has an honorifics button that you can turn on and off to increase or decrease the level of politeness in which you're speaking to someone, because in Korean they have honorifics like in Japanese or in Chinese, right? So in English we don't necessarily have honorifics like they do in Korean, or politeness levels of speech like they do in Korean. And so that's also a really cool feature about Papago, is that it'll let you choose, you know, how formal or how informal you want to translate your sentence into. So before you start anything, before you look up any resources, go ahead and get Papago and stay away from Miss Google Translate. Nothing against her, she's real cute, but when it comes to Korean, Papago is the way to go. 10 times out of 10. Okay, so we're gonna get started with the first resource that I use, which is talktomeinkorean.com. So Talk to Me in Korean, they have a website, like I said, they have a YouTube channel, they have an Instagram, of course, they have podcasts, they have a library where they make and create their own workbooks, textbooks, study resources, and materials to go along with the lessons. And in my opinion, how to study Korean? Girl, who? What? Talk to Me in Korean is by far my favorite resource that I have come across, just because of how user-friendly it is, #1. #2, it has everything you could possibly need. So Talk to Me in Korean is separated into 10 different levels, and there's even a level test that you can take, and it's kind of like a placement test to see where your Korean learning abilities are as it stands. And so when I took that test back in like what, July-ish, I want to say, it put me at a level 6 out of 10. Now, you best believe your girl went all the way back to level 1, because I have no clue. I literally have no clue. I think it's just my Korean like comprehension is like, you know, she's real cute. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's up there. But speaking and actually knowing the grammar rules, actually understanding why I know why this sentence makes sense, you know what I mean? I had to go back and learn the basics. So that's why I went all the way back to level 1 and just started from scratch. Now, their levels are super easy to navigate. Like I said, there's 10 levels. Each one has about 30 lessons in them. And they're really quick and easy. If you're someone who learns really well off of like bullet points or PowerPoint presentations versus sitting down and reading an entire textbook, then for sure Talk to Me in Korean is going to be the resource for you. Another reason that I like it is they have an entire library, like I was mentioning before, where you can actually purchase books, textbooks to go along with the lessons. You can purchase books that don't necessarily have anything to do with a specific lesson, but they're detailed or geared geared toward a specific practice. For example, they have books for speaking practice, reading practice. They have books for people if you're going to Korea to visit for the first time, or if you're going to move there, but you're not really familiar with the language. They have stuff that can help you brush up on your everyday Korean, like Korean that you would use in a coffee shop or in a grocery store or in a movie theater, that kind of stuff. So it's really, really well-rounded, really helpful. The website is really user-friendly. They also have 2 different YouTube channels, one which is filmed completely in Korean and then one that's in Korean and English. And so if you want to get some good listening practice in, you can also check out those those YouTube channels as well as their podcast. I usually listen to the podcast like if I'm getting ready in the morning and I've got some time. While I'm making my breakfast, while I'm picking out my clothes, I'll just throw on the podcast and listen to a lesson about, or listen to them chat about their favorite color, or their favorite Korean food, or their favorite movies and stuff like that. So it just kind of trains your ear to get comfortable listening to Korean more often. And so that's why I like listening to those podcasts and to the YouTube channels as well, because they're also very funny. Like, their videos are actually hilarious. The next resource that I want to go over is also a website. It's called howtostudykorean.com. And so when I first got serious about wanting to learn Korean, How to Study Korean was the one that I checked out first. I got about 3-ish lessons in, and then I realized that, oh, you know, this isn't really my learning style. I don't learn well this way. What I do really, really love about howtostudykorean.com is the vocabulary. So what I'll do is I do my lessons from, like, the lessons that I take notes on. I'll do those from talktomeinkorean.com, and then on the bottom what I've started doing is including a section just for vocabulary, and that I get from howtostudykorean.com, because each lesson they start out with a vocabulary list that's pretty thick. Like, they got a bunch of words on there. And so what I'll do is I'll just go through the list and see whatever word that I don't recognize, or whatever word I can't translate back and forth from English to Korean and then from Korean to English. I'll go ahead and write that down at the bottom of the page for that lesson. And that's kind of how I study my vocab, because Lord knows, grammar, great. Comprehension, listening, amazing. Vocab, we're getting there. She's a work in progress. You know what I'm saying? It's about the journey. You know what I mean? So it's definitely a work in progress with the vocabulary, but that's a really, really, really good way to learn. They also have, what's it called? What are those things called? Well, you look for the word. Girl, word search. Word search. So howtostudykorean.com actually has word searches as well. I believe it's at the bottom of the lesson. Once you finish it, you can like click the little link and it'll take you to a PDF version of a word search, and you can go ahead and like search for the words that were included in the vocabulary list in the beginning of the section or lesson, and that's a really good way to reinforce the material that you learn there. If you're someone that can sit down and read a textbook and you learn really well out of the book, then howtostudykorean.com is definitely going to be a good resource for you. That's not my truth personally, you know what I'm saying? That's not how I learn best. That's not my learning style. And something that I didn't necessarily enjoy about howtostudykorean.com is you could go through half of a page of the lesson and it'll be explaining a grammar structure, or, you know, just a form of speaking, and then you get to the bottom and it's like, don't worry about it, you don't need to know this yet, or you don't know how to use this grammar rule, or you don't know how to use this or that, so you can just forget the entire page and a half that you've just read. And I'm like, okay, Miss Girl, okay, all right. But like I said, I know there are people who have the attention span and the time to just sit down and kind of read through. It's very, very detailed. It's very informative. Whereas Talk to Me in Korean is very much bullet points. Here's the facts. Here's how you use it. This, that's done. Here are some examples and that's it. So that's personally how I learn best. But again, I love using that resource for vocabulary and using Talk to Me in Korean for grammar. And so it kind of, you know, it's a marriage. Everybody's happy. Everybody goes home happy. You get something out of everybody. So I'm going to move on to different apps that I use. 2 apps that I'm going to talk about in particular are HelloTalk and Memrise. So HelloTalk is an app for the language learning community. It's for people who are learning different languages to get together with people who either already speak those languages natively or who are also learning those languages. And so what I did, I set my native language to English, and then the language that I'm learning, of course, Korean, and it'll match you up with different language partners who either speak Korean natively and are learning English, or speak Korean and are helping people learn Korean. And I actually made two pretty cool, I met two pretty cool people on there. The only problem with that is I live in Florida, in the US. I'm as East Coast as it gets. Korea is now 14 hours ahead of me. So that means if it's 9 o'clock in the morning for me, it is 11 o'clock at night for them over there. So there's a very small window of time in which we're both awake and actually able to have a full like conversation. And so that's really the only kind of downfall. Of course, it depends on what language you're learning, or if you're matched up with a language partner that lives in the same country as you. Both of the language partners that I had live in Korea, and so it's just that time difference. It's that time difference. That 14 hours is rough. So, but again, it is a really good, you can even find friends who are learning Korean with you, and you guys can kind of go back and forth texting. A really cool feature in the app is if you're texting someone and you kind of like mess up the grammar or whatever, the person that's reading it can actually go in and help correct your grammar for you, and it'll show you like the correction made for you. That way going forward, you know, oh, okay, so it's spelled this way, or it's pronounced this way, or it's written this way, that kind of thing. Another app that's really good for learning Korean, especially when it comes to learning vocab and speaking practice, is Memrise. And I've just started recently getting into Memrise, using it heavily for the past few weeks. It's really good because it teaches you completely in Hangul, which is the Korean alphabet, the Korean writing system. So there is no romanization. You are forced to learn how to read it, which if you have struggles reading Hangul, don't worry. Talk to Me in Korean actually has some books on it. I'm over here fangirling about Talk to Me in Korean. I cannot praise them enough for what they do. They're amazing. But Memrise is really good for learning vocab. They really focus on repetition to get the word or the phrase into your head, so you're comfortable hearing it, you're comfortable reading it, you're comfortable saying it, so that way, you know, you can build up. Now, the last resource that I want to talk about is not necessarily one specific resource. It's kind of a general term, but it's just media in general. Social media, TV shows, movies, game shows, any of that kind of stuff. I started watching Korean TV shows in like middle school, freshman year of high school, and it really helped, I think, solidify Korean listening for me, and picking up and noticing speech patterns. Even if I couldn't understand what I was hearing at the time, getting comfortable hearing the language, getting comfortable hearing the kind of inflections and the way that they speak and the tones that they use. And two shows that I really liked that helped me in terms of listening and understanding were Return of Superman and Knowing Bros. Knowing Bros is actually on Netflix if you want to check it out. And Return of Superman you can watch on YouTube. All the episodes are on YouTube for free. And something that I really like about those two shows is that both of them are unscripted. So they're unscripted and they're mostly spoken in panmar, which is casual, just comfortable speech. There's no formality involved, there's no heightened language, and so it's a very good representation of how Korean people speak to each other, or how Korean people speak comfortably amongst each other in everyday life. And to me, that was really important for me to learn, and I think it's helped in my understanding of the Korean language a lot more. And I'm really glad that I actually got to dive into those shows when I did, because I think it strengthened my understanding of the language so much more. And so I would highly encourage somebody who is learning Korean to pick a TV show, pick a movie, pick a series that you really enjoy, and listen to it with the subtitles on, listen to it with the subtitles off. If you can, listen to it with the dual subtitles on, listen to it with no subtitles on, just to get comfortable listening to that language. There are also YouTube channels that teach Korean in Korean. I think there's actually a channel called Teach Korean in Korean, or Learn Korean in Korean rather. And that's a really good one as well. It's kind of almost like a full immersion simulation, right? So if someone lives in a country where they speak a foreign language, you're a lot more inclined to pick up that language faster than someone who's learning it in a country where it's not spoken. And so learning a language in that language is just, you pick it up a lot faster. And so that's what I like about learning Korean in Korean. That's a really good resource for you as well. And if you're looking for speaking practice, go on social media. There are people on TikTok, on Instagram, on Discord channels, and all those kinds of things that are learning Korean. You can go on HelloTalk, you can try out italki or Goodnight, all these different kinds of apps that are geared towards connecting people who are trying to get better at speaking Korean, learning Korean. So those are some of the resources that have helped me. In the future, I definitely plan on doing some videos breaking down how I study grammar specifically, how I study vocab, how I practice listening, how I practice speaking, reading, writing, all that good stuff. Of course, if there's a video specifically that you'd like to see, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. If you're still watching this video at this time and you are a K-drama watcher, please comment your favorite K-drama down below. I just finished Nevertheless yesterday. Girl, yes, I know I'm late. No, you don't have to come for me, all right? I just finished Nevertheless yesterday, and that was really good. I think the last K-drama I watched before that was Vincenzo, and that's a whole nother video. You know what I'm saying? That's a whole nother, we can't even get into that right now. But yes, that was it for today's video. If you guys have any questions about any of the resources that I went over, you can send them to me via DM on Instagram. You can comment them down below in this video. You can hit me up wherever you can find me. That sounded a lot more different than what I intended. Please don't stalk me. Please. And that is it for today's video. So you guys be cool. I will see you in the next one. Peace.